Welcome to the Crack House Chronicles, your favorite true crime podcast. I am Donnie, and with me is a man that says the gambling addiction hotlines would be so much better if every 10th caller was a winner.
Man,
It's Dale.
look at there. That's big brain over there.
Oh, yeah, man.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, you're a winner.
Coins start shooting out
Man.
the phone. That'd be cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah. What's going on there, dude?
You know, same old, same old.
Oh, yeah, same old, same old. Rocking and rolling.
Rocking and rolling.
Yeah, we in the Crack House doing an episode today, dude.
Hey, listen, we got big news.
Man.
Look at there.
Dale's got the clap.
I do. That's a good day. We got a brand new Apple Podcast 5-star review, and this comes from My Monster Pets. It says, fantastic, must listen. So we can just finish right there.
Oh, yeah.
I grew up in
Don't need any more than that.
Yeah, I grew up in Cleveland County and have since moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Listening to these guys bring my deep roots of home out. Very descriptive in their adjectives. Take me back to being in Cleveland County.
Oh, yeah.
Keep up the great work.
No place like Cleveland County.
Cleveland County, boy.
Yep.
Bring it on home.
Where everybody knows everybody.
That's right.
Yep. Well, if you go to Myrtle Beach, that's basically Cleveland County.
You know,
I mean,
what's Ocean Lakes?
Ocean
Cleveland
Lakes.
Lake.
Yeah, that's Cleveland County.
So, yeah, we appreciate you taking the time there, My Monster Pets, for dropping us a 5-star review.
Yeah, it means so much.
Yeah, it helps out more than you guys know.
Yeah, if you want to be like Monster Pets and go to Apple Podcast, you can leave a 5-star rate and review.
Or you can just go to Myrtle Beach. They did that too.
They did. And they got a shout out from Myrtle Beach.
That's right.
And we'll give you a shout out too.
Shout it out.
Yeah, shout it out loud.
Down there.
And remember, guys, fall and winter's coming up, so you can get you a hoodie, get you a cap or long sleeve T-shirt from the store page.
Yes, sir.
It helps keep the lights on, and
It'll keep you warm.
yeah, and take a picture of it when you're wearing it and send it to us, and we'll post it on our socials.
That's right, because you know you'll be looking all cool.
Oh yeah, man. All right, dude. After this short break, we're going to get in this episode.
All right, Dan, let's roll.
All right, Dale. You know, we've been heavy on the Asha Degree case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, it's been a lot of the news lately. We've been covering the search warrant. We've talked to other people about this case and getting their perspective on it. And man, we got a special guest on the show today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he is a attorney from Cleveland County there in Shelby, and he's agreed to come on the show and give his insight on the case. And we'll talk about the search warrant a little bit and some other things related to the Asha Degree case. But
Yeah, he's done a lot of research on this case too.
he has.
Yeah.
But we want to welcome Frank McFarland to the show. Welcome to the show, Frank.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
We
Excited to be here.
We appreciate you coming on and doing this, dude.
Man, that's no problem at all.
Yeah, before we get going, tell us a little bit about you and your background and what got you into lawyering.
Gosh. I wish I had a good answer for that, but, you know, about 15 years or so ago, I was starting a kind of dead-end job doing some sales, and one night about 3 a.m. I decided I was going to law school. So I don't know how much of a story that is, but it's one of those things that family and friends have told me forever, you know, how much I enjoyed arguing and things like that. If you see a family reunion or a family dinner, you'd probably know why, what led me in the direction of becoming a lawyer.
Oh, yeah, I've been to some of them family reunions too.
It's pretty impressive though.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that means my wife should be a lawyer.
I think she should, yeah. But, you know, you and I have talked on the phone quite a bit, and we've talked about the Asha Degree case, and you agreed to come on the show, and you've done a lot of research on this, and you have your own TikTok channel on this. Tell us a little bit about that and what all you've done on that.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a leap of faith. It's fairly new into this. One of the things that really over the last couple of years or so, I mean, I guess it goes back longer than that, but the last couple of years or so, I've really gotten a passion for wrongful conviction cases and finding those. And I had my TikTok channel where it's mostly, you know, started out doing a little bit of criminal law and a little bit of family law on there, and ended up being more family law related. But I really wanted to branch into doing some talking about, you know, kind of those wrongful conviction type cases. The hard part is, though, if it's a case that you're currently in, it's really hard to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, somehow I had a judge friend of mine that said, hey, why don't you think about, you know, diving into a cold case, and picked one. You know, it's been months ago now. It's one that I knew a lot about, obviously, and have followed for pretty much my whole life growing up here in Asha's case. But, you know, it's became pretty much an obsession since then. But I have I really enjoyed, kind of diving in, and I think what I thought was a cold case at the time that obviously, as we know now, was very much not. And so there's been a lot of changes that have happened in the last few weeks in terms of that involvement too.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, when the Sheriff's Department came out with the press release saying, they've got some information, they're getting ready to serve a search warrant. I mean, that turned Cleveland County up on its ear a little bit.
It did. I spent a lot of time out there that week. Really, I stayed almost the whole day Wednesday out there across at Spake's Farm, and it was weird. I kind of, in hindsight, I wish I wouldn't have, to be honest with you. It was exciting. It was something that you wanted to get some closure and information, but it also ended up being a very toxic kind of information sharing gone wild that was leading people in all kinds of directions that weren't necessarily the best. And it was an interesting experience from that standpoint. It's hard to say any of it was good, bad, whatever. When you're dealing with a case like this, it's all bad. But that was a wild ride of a week for sure.
Yeah, the law enforcement, they come out pretty quick saying, not to spread rumors, not to jump to conclusions on anything. But like you said, people were all over social media.
Oh, God.
They were, the stuff I read, I really just had to get offline. I mean, it was just out there, dude.
And I'm sure as much as you've been talking about it, everybody was sending you messages and telling you everything every 5 minutes as well, like they did us.
That's exactly right. I had actually just happened Tuesday morning. I made my first kind of big public social media post on my personal social media, not on TikTok. And that post had kind of, got a lot more traction than I expected it to get. And it happened at the same time that they were going out there. So it went absolutely crazy. I don't know how many messages, friend requests, different theories that were running out there. It really went wild after, really mostly Wednesday. But from Wednesday forward, it really got out of control for sure.
Yeah, for us, when it first started, and everybody, all the rumors were going that maybe it was about her. And then as the time went on and the inboxes got full, I'm like, I don't know what the heck's going on. Maybe we got some kind of full-blown something going on down there that don't have anything to do with her. So I was kind of glad that Sheriff Norman come out and said it was definitely about that. So I kind of calmed down a little bit, And then they actually I could put the clamps on the next day because we didn't hear anything after that.
Yeah, that was helpful, and I understand. Law enforcement was dealing with an impossible situation there no matter what, because everybody assumed it was just this huge, development, and it had to be related to the case, and then you have all these, I don't know if there was a poll out there, but, if you would have polled kind of the community, it was very heavily that there was, remains and bodies and, all these crazy things that turned out not to be true. Confessions and all this stuff that was floating out there.
Yes.
And skulls and everything else.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bodies in the walls.
Yeah, we heard a little bit of everything, man. Our email was blowing up and our messenger was blowing up. We couldn't even keep up with it.
Yeah. Donnie just had to shut down. He couldn't take it.
Yeah, I couldn't deal with it after a while. It was just too much. So what was your, Frank, what was your thoughts on Sheriff Norman's press release that he came out with initially?
Well, I thought I would have liked to seen it a day or two earlier, but I understand why it wasn't released then. They still didn't know exactly what they were going to find or exactly what was going to come out of those warrants. I do think that probably given what had happened, it would have been nice to have heard that a little bit sooner, but I'm just not sure how possible that was. Overall, though, I thought it was the right message, and I think it really did calm that down. And then we kind of had, it sort of became a little bit of circus from there because you have that rolling into David Teddy's press conference that happened on Friday. But yeah, I thought the statement was a good one, and I think it was probably better to do something like that than, stand up there and get questions you can't answer and, talk through these things that probably were not going to move in much of a direction anyway. So I thought it was pretty well done on that front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it would have done any good to come out and to say anything personally because it's just been a waste of time and money because he definitely is not going to answer any questions because they don't know either, right? So then we get to David Teddy.
Yeah, we get into David Teddy stuff.
I want to know what your take is on this show.
Well, I guess I will say this. Obviously, let me start with this. I don't know if anybody local people know David Teddy. I know David Teddy fairly well. I've been around him for a while now, but he is, if he's not the best, he's up there.
Right.
And he's widely considered that way, almost too good for some people. Sometimes when you have somebody that's hiring David Teddy, there's almost this, undercurrent of like, well, why would they need to hire David Teddy? I know that's crazy to even say, but sometimes it does play out that way. But it's hard for me to ever really question anything that he did. And I thought at the time I wasn't sure exactly what he was going to do with that. I thought it was a situation where you have these rumors, you have this speculation, and, where law enforcement had been mostly quiet about what had happened, and really has been from the start. Obviously they've made that decision pretty early, but he was able to fill in some of those gaps. And I actually thought it would work better than I think overall it has. I don't think it's gone badly, but at the time I was like, this is great. And I've studied a lot of, obviously when you're practicing criminal law and you follow higher profile cases, and I can never think of anything like this before. I don't think I've ever seen, a press conference exactly like this, where you have somebody that you have these very public search warrants, you have all these rumors, and then you have this scenario where there's no charges brought and an opportunity for him to fill in some of those gaps. I mean, it's just sort of unheard of, and he even hinted at this in that speech where he says, look, I've never done this. I would almost always say not to do this. But, this is kind of a special situation where I have to kind of, sort of at least tamp down some of those rumors that have been floating out there. And he did that. And I think, you did a good job of that. And it was very professional. There was nothing I would really critique overall about it. I'm sure the sheriff's office probably wasn't the most thrilled with it, but that's sort of the nature of the game and how that plays out, too.
Well, he's hired to do a job. I mean, he's hired to represent Roy Lee Dedmon. And right there in the press conference is almost, him hired to do that job. He pretty much said that it could be possibly Russell Underhill, who is dead now, that committed some kind of type of crime.
Well, he didn't say no name because it wasn't out yet.
No, it wasn't out yet, but
Excuse me.
That's what he was saying. It could be a dead person, which Russell Underhill is dead. So that's just David Teddy's job.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and it's hard for people to understand that when it comes to defense lawyers and what we do, in a situation like that. But the rights are not there they're not there just for the innocent person. If you only, and I'm not saying Willie Dedmon is guilty or innocent, on that line, but it's just you protecting rights. The lawyer's job is there for everybody, including those that did not commit a crime and those that did. Mm-hmm. And if you don't represent them both the same way, then you're not going to get that for the people that are innocent. So he definitely was doing a job. And I was interested, though. I thought the Underhill stuff would play better than, at least in my circles, the way that it has. I don't think it's really caught on the way that I would have expected it to, honestly, if that makes sense. But, that's a lot of just speculation and what people are saying. It just hasn't been, David Teddy hints. I wonder if he hadn't said it, how that would have played out, once you see it and know about it. Or would have, as many people have seen it, had David Teddy not said those things. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting questions, and we won't know those answers. But it made for a very interesting end of the week for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Because he mentioned it could be a dead person, and that's the only dead person with DNA connected to the case that we know of anyway. That they've let out.
Yeah. So, yeah. I don't see a scenario that he wasn't talking about Russell Underhill with that, but.
Well, I mean, he really couldn't do much more than that, I mean, he just come out and do what he did and throw a few crumbs over here for you. Hey, look over here. But, I mean, really, what's he going to do? And a lot of people have said to us, well, he might be guilty. He's run and got a lawyer off the bat. I'm like, well, who wouldn't run and got a lawyer off the bat? I mean, I think
this is
if you didn't, you're not very smart at all. If you didn't just go ahead and call somebody, because this is serious.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In this scenario, and keep in mind, they're serving these warrants, so they're familiar with, at least a little bit of the baseline when this happens. They're questioning him at the same time, I think, is how that ended up. I think that's how Teddy hinted that it was happening.
He sure did.
But when that's all going on, if you have the means and you're not getting a lawyer at that point, you're not making a very wise decision. And I know the profession can occasionally get a bad name on stuff like that, but you have no choice really when you're put in a situation like that, I don't think. But again, that doesn't mean one way or another. It doesn't mean they're any more innocent or any more guilty, is my take on that part.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I believe that.
Yeah, he just wants his rights protected and looked after. Absolutely.
You need somebody who knows what they're doing when you get in something like that. I think,
absolutely. You got somebody knocking on your door. We got a search warrant. Yeah.
Oh, no, call. We need you to come up here and answer some questions, and then you find out while you're up here answering some questions, they've got 1,000 cars in your yard.
Yeah,
that's serious.
Yeah, exactly. So, Frank, what was your take on the search warrant overall? I'm sure you read through it many times and probably talked to some of your colleagues about it too.
Yeah, I have, and gosh, it's interesting to me. It was a huge. Obviously, it was a huge deal with a lot of resources that they poured into this search.
Oh, yeah.
And there are a lot of very interesting things that came out of this. Things that, if you take, like obviously assuming the facts that are in the affidavit from the warrant, if you take those things and you play them out with a lot of the items that were removed in the inventory, I think there's a lot of potential for there to be connection and interesting, facts that get there. I was hoping with the level of, resources that were there, I was hoping we were closer to the finish line than maybe we are. I don't know. That's obviously hard to know. I still think there probably is information that's not in those warrants, but that's a tricky line to kind of dive into if you're law enforcement too. But, we don't know what came out of that yet, obviously. But if there was, it still feels like there's some time that we're going to be waiting here, I guess would be my overall thought on the warrants as a whole. But there's it's the first real new information that we've gotten in years with this case.
Oh,
so,
yeah. So
lots to sink your teeth.
So would law enforcement, they would be holding back some stuff, but would they just have to have just enough information to be able to get a search warrant and still hold back some stuff from the public?
It's possible. I will say you would run some risks there. I mean, because you can have information that you obtain in a warrant that could later be inadmissible in court if, they deem it to be, if they find there to be problems with the warrant itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a risk that you could run. I do think there is a possibility that, obviously it's not everything in their case file. I mean, we know that part. But each warrant in particular is designed to get a certain, search. To search a certain property or to get, DNA from a certain person. So you would definitely leave some things out just because they're not relevant to why you would search that property. But I think it's a fine line because they wanted to be able to get to everything. So I think probably there are things that are not in there, but I don't know. I guess it's impossible really to say. But I would think that the most convincing pieces are probably there, but there may be other smaller pieces that could play a big role in how that whole puzzle fits together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they know a lot more than they're saying, but just not necessarily in the search warrants.
Now, there's one part of the search warrant that kind of puzzles me, that they mention in there that Asha was seen being pulled into a green car. Now, over the years, we've never heard that until the search warrant come out. Most of it was just she was spotted, then stepped off the road into a small wooded area or something.
And then later the news come out that this was a car of interest or something.
Yeah, the green car of interest. Now, how much would law enforcement need to be able to put that into a search warrant that she was seen being pulled into a car? Would they have to have a signed
something saying it's truthful?
Yeah, a statement from someone stating that it's truthful?
Well, there are certain parts. I guess I'm going to get into the realm of speculation a little bit on this, so I will say this part. I think that there's some case law. There have been situations, at least confidential informants in scenarios like that. You do have a certain reliability factor that can factor into whether that, there is probable cause in the warrant itself or in the affidavit itself. this is a strange. Obviously, that was the first thing that I highlighted going through this. Is the first thing that you get through, other than kind of just knowing where they are searching. If you're reading through each warrant, it's the first one where you're like, like that's different.
Yeah.
And it could be that they have known this from day one. It very much could be that is exactly the tip that they received then. There is, at least in my opinion, at least one mystery tip kind of in the newspaper articles from the start that have fit in. I know that the green car itself, if you talk to enough people, there have been rumblings about that green car or potentially a meetup that happened prior to the releasing of that information or something kind of like that, or getting into a car. So it's hard to know. I don't think we know anything about that, though. Obviously, there's nothing in the warrants themselves that tell, hey, this is the identity of this person and this is where it is. But they are swearing that out, so obviously they have to have a certain piece of reliability. These are persuasive in nature, so again, there's a purpose to them. What they're trying to do is say, hey, we want to get access to this. I spent a lot of time trying to think about why they would make the distinction between calling this an unclassified homicide or some other potential crime that maybe would be at least not lining it out that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe this is a piece of that puzzle too, where it does kind of change that dynamic to more fit, obviously, a murder picture. And with that, it probably opens the door to getting more access to more items on the property. At least that's my best guess on that. So I don't know. I'm speculating some with that. It doesn't mean that it's not. They can't make it up. I mean, they're swearing this out. But it is one of those things that, you kind of wonder how that language was used initially. Did they go back? Did they say, hey, was it this or that? Who knows what might have happened or what more they may have, at least in terms of that tip. But it is probably the most interesting one now of all. And I think for a long time that was a tip that was scrutinized probably more, or there was less information known about, and all of a sudden it's very much at the forefront with this warrant affidavit.
Oh, absolutely. Was there anything else particular in the search warrant that you found peculiar or interesting that you'd like to mention?
Raised your brows.
Yes. Like, made you go,
Well, there are a few things, like I noted probably about 10 things total, I would say out of it. So not that many when you talk about the 100 pages or so that's in there. There were a few other things. The location of the DNA evidence, at least as it relates to Anna Lee Dedmon, was interesting to me. I don't, again, I'm not an expert in this. I don't know exactly what to glean from that. But they are clear in it. They don't really talk about where Russell Underhill's DNA was found, right, other than it just says that the two of them they say Anna Lee's, the hair stem was found on the undershirt, and then they say that the combination of the two had DNA on the undershirt and the trash bag. If I'm, deductively, I think that means that at least Russell Underhill's DNA was on the outside of the trash bag, but it could have also been, on the undershirt or somewhere else too. I think is potentially a plausible outcome, but that was interesting to me that they lined that out that way. And I don't know, I don't know if that means it means more, but it could obviously. And I think there's a reason that they included the location.
Mm-hmm.
There was definitely them taking more DNA swabs indicated to me, and it hints at this in there too. I think it says it actually, but that there may be other DNA profiles that they're looking into too. So, I think there could be more out of DNA.
Mm-hmm. They had one daughter living in Texas. It just makes me wonder if they, maybe went to Texas. We haven't heard that anywhere, but
we've had people ask.
Yeah, we've had people ask.
Yeah, I will say this. Okay, I've heard some speculation on that point, obviously, but I will say that I'm pretty confident that David Teddy said that they had talked to all of the family members in his press conference, and that they all gave this similar story. So I think you can assume that they talked to her. Now, whether that meant she came here, whether that meant they went there, who knows exactly how that played out. But I've heard those rumblings too. I think it's safe to say that they've talked to all the daughters, though, at least based on my understanding of what David Teddy said.
Yeah. What about the stuff that was taken or seized from 621 Cherville Road? We can start with that part. They listed a lot of things, but then some of the things got kind of vague. It wouldn't, they said they took a laptop here, a computer there, a camera, but then they got into some particulars like clothing, but they didn't really mention anything, like detailed stuff like that. Is that necessary, or to put it vague like that, or they just have to list it?
Well, I will say this. It would be my opinion, like in terms of, if as a defense lawyer, I think that the return and the inventory after, I think, is going to be less problematic for them if they don't have those details. Meaning, I don't think it's going to be to make the warrant itself defective, even if there were issues there. At least not like that. If they were too vague in an inventory, I don't think it's going to have problems on that. But there were some parts like that in there, and you can see, some of them they may have all been. I think some were typed and some were handwritten, and some were more, just kind of thrown together, and it looked like obviously there was more time taken in some. Especially that 621 is the one that felt like they spent the most time on, at least on the inventory, which is also the property that they spent, I think, the most time at least from what was known to the public, and also the property that I think it talked about that they had done the drone surveillance back in February on too.
Yeah, 601.
Yeah. So what's your overall take on the search warrant, Frank? Was it, obviously, us reading through it several times, there was a lot of thought and effort put into it. What is your overall thought on it?
Is it overkill so we don't mess this up?
Well,
we don't know why we're looking at. We're just reading.
They don't. They didn't want to mess this up. I think that part you can safely assume. I would assume there was a lot of people looking at this. A lot of hands that it probably went through before this thing goes out there. They tried. And I do think maybe that's an importance of the murder designation too. But they wanted everything that they thought could possibly relate to this. And now typically, you have to be reasonable in the scope of what, it has to be reasonably tailored to that. So there is some restrictions that they may occasionally have on that. But, I think overall it was pretty clear they wanted to detail out as many details as possible to make it as general as possible, if that makes sense, what I'm saying. Like, they wanted pretty much everything falling in those categories. And I think overall they did a fairly good job of that. But it made it complicated, really, for us, kind of as members of the public. It made it really hard to know, are we talking about something that's going to end this case, or are we talking about just the beginning of an investigation into these people? And I still think, even after the warrants, it's a little bit hard to know, the answer between those two things.
How common is it, or let me ask you, how long would this stuff usually take to come back as far as the stuff they seized, computerized stuff, cell phones, and different things like that? How long does that usually take to get analyzed? Or would they push this to the front, you think?
I would expect the digital evidence probably is, and there can be times where they're doing more, maybe there's more advanced things that they may be doing with some of that would take more time. Obviously, there is a human element to that part. Somebody's got to go through it. Yeah. So that's going to take time. With some of the other things, like, more of your kind of DNA testing and that side, you're really just talking about a pretty set timeline that they probably are at, kind of the top of the list on. But it's not surprising that we haven't heard anything today. It wouldn't be surprising to me if we never really hear much out of this until charges are brought, or if charges are not, until there's some other development, in the case. But it also wouldn't surprise me if we heard something, very soon too.
Yeah.
Obviously, depending on what was found out of that stuff.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, we did the Nancy Grace show, and then at the end, while we were doing it and about ready to wrap up, that's when the search warrants were opened. And so after we recorded, they went back and then added a little piece with another lady or whatever, so just to tidy it up a little bit. And on there, they mentioned that there had been polygraphs taken. Have you heard anything about that? And when I text them and ask them, I'm like, we haven't heard this. Where did you get this information from? And they sent me back a link, and the link was AtlantaBlackStar.com. And in the article, it says, we'll go on down here, an attorney for the Dedmons denied the family's involvement in Asha's disappearance. Police documents show that the family had given numerous statements to investigators and passed polygraph tests linked to the case. Have you heard anything about that?
I think that information, my gut reaction to that was that they combined information related to the degrees with the Dedmons.
That's exactly what I thought. That's why I'm like, wait a minute, I think y'all got this confused, because I just don't see no way in the world David Teddy's letting anybody take a polygraph.
Here's what he's not doing. He's definitely not sending them down to the sheriff's office or the FBI and, hooking them up. Like, that's not how it's going to play out.
Right.
If he were, I think that would be something that he would do internally and set up internally. I think that's something that there are people that would do that. There are definitely cases where you would consider, a polygraph if you're doing it more independently. I just don't think you would do it in a way like you want control of that, because
for sure,
there are a lot of different ways that they're going to be administered. And again, that doesn't mean it's less trustworthy or anything like that. They're just, polygraphs now are probably more reliable. They are fairly reliable, in certain situations. But from a legal context, there's just been such a bad history with them and the way that they were used. Correct. That it makes it really hard to have people set up for them. And the reason for that is because law enforcement can lie, in these interactions. And I don't know if you watched, you watch The Wire or some of the other kind of detective shows where they do. I know The Wire has one where they have it on a copier and it's like true lie, or something like that.
Right.
Where they have it running through and they run the other guy by with the McDonald's bag. I mean, maybe that's pushing it. That may not be legal, but it's just one of those things where there were a lot of false confessions came out of scenarios like this. But those are not happening nearly as often in 2024. I would just say polygraph is possible, but I would say that is information that only David Teddy and the family would know at this point, unless, obviously, I guess if it came back, the way they wanted it to, maybe they would leak it out in a certain way. I'm just not sure that's how that would have played out.
Yeah, right. So if they had one come in and do independent, they'd never even have to say anything about it if it didn't turn out the way they like it. So just don't even mention that happened. Right.
Some question on that, but yeah, I think for the most part that would be the way that you would do it. It's it's more of a work product type thing. I don't know. I'm probably diving too deep in the weeds on that part, but I just don't believe that there was I would not imagine that David Teddy went to just some random news publication and said, "Hey, we did this," but not release it to other people. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, well, it didn't to us either. That's why I was asking you maybe if you knew.
So when they were searching 621 Cherville Road, they had search dogs out there. They had cadaver dogs, and they had a little bit of everything out there, choppers and
ground penetrating radar.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Frank: if they would have found a body that day, would there have been somebody in cuffs, you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
That's a guess a little bit. I mean, it is possible, I suppose, in a scenario like this that you still wouldn't have enough to charge, but I mean, I feel like that would have probably resulted in an arrest.
Yeah.
Based on what's in the affidavit.
Yeah, I mean, they went in hot and heavy, and they were looking for stuff. I just didn't know how close they were to putting the cuffs on somebody, or if they were just I just don't know. That's why I'm asking.
I think it's a good question, and I don't know that we know that answer until maybe they do put cuffs on somebody. I think if you take the affidavits as a whole, I think there's a pretty big gap between where they are, at least as to Roy and Connie. There's a pretty big gap between what's in that affidavit and having enough to charge them with murder, let's say.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that that's not out there. I mean, it doesn't mean that they didn't find. I mean, it wouldn't take a lot of links to all of a sudden. I mean, because clearly you have a connection, and a connection that's related to foul play and related to her disappearance. It's just you don't know how much that ties back into them directly. At this point, I think there was none other than just the circumstances about Underhill and Annalise DNA, and obviously her age factoring in, which I thought they did a pretty good job of laying that out in the affidavit, but that's still, I would say it's loose at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you boil it all the way down, they really have a bag with some DNA in it way up the road, and that's it.
Pretty much.
I mean, if you boil it all the way down to, from what it started out as, besides what they're going through.
Yeah, I agree with that, but there are a lot of interesting things that came out of this. So I don't want to downplay what they did. It's just with all of the resources and the tools that they used, it is a little deflating to have this come out of it, would be my thought. But I mean, I'm sure it is to them too. That's not something new to them. They decided to take a chance. And even as they were going out there, at least one search warrant was that they got after they started this, and they were talking to people. There's talk about some interviews in there too.
Mm-hmm. But all this stuff that's come out, most of the focus is on the Dedmons and Russell Underhill and the search warrant and all this stuff. But me and Dale constantly talk about this case, and our $1 million question is, how did Asha get out of that house and out to the highway?
Yeah, the first 100 yards of this story kind of gets buried now because everybody's got all this fresh new stuff to look at. But to us, it's from the bedroom to the highway. Why and what caused that to happen to make all those start? That's the big question to me.
Yeah. It's easy to lose sleep over that question. And, this doesn't bring any clarity other than I think it probably confirms I don't want to go too far on this, but obviously it suggests that she was out there,
right?
Because you have these other people that are involved in that. And the warrant makes this clear too. They have no connection between the Dedmon family and Asha's family, which is, it's bizarre. It's bizarre how you get from that place. And I still think it, obviously it's possible that those two things are not connected in some way, but I want to know is there some link that could be found. And I've spent a lot of time trying to avoid the why she left the house, the first 100 yards, or whatever you want to call it,
right,
of that walk, because I think it sort of gets in the way of the facts that we do have. But that's the big question. And if you could tie that back, then it's much easier to say there's a criminal case there against somebody.
Right.
It's much easier to say, hey, here's a full narrative of what happened. And I think, honestly, if you don't have a lot more, it could be problematic for a case, a trial on this, regardless of what they come out of this with. Because I do think there's some people that can't get past it. It doesn't matter what you bring to them. It's like they can't wrap their brain around the idea that this child left home that night, or that whatever, might have happened in between. But I hope I don't hope necessarily it's not a good thing to have a link, but in terms of a criminal investigation, obviously that would be a much cleaner, way that you could kind of tie up, and paint a full picture with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just something that lingers in our mind all the time. I'm one of those that asked that 100-yard question. How did she...
The where and the why and all that,
Yeah.
What put her in this spot in the first place?
Yeah, exactly.
Because then you get mown deeper into the woods. The weeds. I guess we're in the woods by now. We've been in the weeds a while, but then it comes into where, was it just something happened, accident, on the side of the road, or was it more, a little more devious than that, as far as a meeting in some way. So, you don't know why she left, so it's all up in the air. It's all speculation, I guess.
Yeah.
As a lawyer, we kind of try to avoid math at all costs if we can. But, if you're talking probability on this, I would definitely say that, the odds of exactly what happening here, let's say independently, she leaves home, she sneaks out, nobody, catches her doing that. She goes through that. She walks a mile south, on 18. And it is not like, I don't care what justification or anything. And I do think it's possible, so don't take that the wrong way. But it is such a scary thing for her to have done, especially at that age, and to go through that. And the weather was not good. Who knows exactly what the weather was like, but may not have been, it definitely wasn't the greatest. it's February, she's going through all this. That's an extremely unlikely thing. The act of something else happening, independently of that is also extremely unlikely. Maybe it's not that unlikely that you would have somebody, like the hit and run type theory or whatever, but that's not the part that would be that unlikely. It's the decision that, hey, we're not in a position to turn this over or try to get this child help or do whatever. We're going to cover this up and we're going to hide that from happening. I'm not saying that's what happened.
Right.
But all of those possibilities become extremely unlikely too.
Exactly.
And again, I'm not a math major, but when you start combining them, I know that exponentially it gets lower odds at that point, but it's all low odds. So, you're dealing with improbable situations that had to have happened no matter what the outcome was. But, they do get exponentially higher once you start combining those independent events. So,
yeah,
we'll see.
It seems like the more information we get so many more scenarios, and all of them or none of them could be true. So, it's so frustrating for us, I guess, to figure out what's going on.
Especially given what happened with this. And this is something I've had to preach to myself, too. Right now is definitely, patience is okay right now. We've had, this has been going on for almost 25 years that this investigation has happened. And I cannot imagine what this family has gone through. I can't imagine what they went through 2 weeks ago, for that matter. But there's so much of that that's just horrible and terrible what they're experiencing and reliving and going back through. But right now, we know they have a lot of information. We know they have a lot of things that they probably wish they had over the last 25 years in terms of a certain location that may have information. Even if it's just those Russell Underhill documents, they have those now. They know a little more about where his whereabouts are, or at least there were a number of things that mentioned Russell Underhill in terms of items that were recovered. So there should be more. At least they have a lot more than they have ever had before right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's reason for some optimism that maybe closure, is as close as it's ever been.
Well, from a legal standpoint, you being an attorney, where do you see this case going in the next 2 weeks, 2 months, and year down the road? How do you see it playing out in your mind?
Well,
that's a hard question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't want to put you on the spot or anything. I'm just,
man.
I do believe they've got some more pieces together. So I think again, it's probably closer. But they know this. What I'm about to say, they know. These are people that have means and they have lawyered up very quickly. It's not the type of case that you would rush to charge. It's not the type of case that you would try to throw something together. The worst thing that could happen here would be a prolonged trial on this that ends up in an acquittal of some kind, right?
mm-hmm.
You're never going to guarantee that result anyway. So, you have to do what you can with the pieces that you have. And if you think it's enough, then, you got to go forward with it. So I'm not saying they would not do that. But at the same time, I think that they have to do what they can to make sure as many of these pieces fit that puzzle first before they take any other steps. And what they release to us after, I don't know. If we're going on the track record, you can almost assume that it's going to be very little. If there was something major that came out of this, I think we'll hear something else before the end of the year. If there's not, we'll probably hear something again, around the anniversary, which has kind of been the track record that has happened, at certain points too.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because, we went for so long of not hearing anything, and then all of a sudden we had a pile of stuff dumped on us, and then it got quiet. So, going by like you said, the track record, I think it's going to, it'll be quiet for a little while until something else comes out or they get something significant happens in the case.
Yeah. Well, and they left us with some, for the internet sleuths and, for everybody else, there's plenty to sink into, because Roy Dedmon is an interesting character, and I think there's a lot to dive into there, and there are going to be plenty of people with their own theories and, own speculations that are going to come out of this, in the time, no matter what law enforcement said. I think that's going to be a likely conclusion of this, but there is plenty that people are diving into, and I know that even I've been kind of impressed that Shelby Starr has even been diving into a little bit of this on some of the investigatory side, which is, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think there have been a lot of people that are really really diving in and really trying to get answers. And, it's shows like yours and then Nancy Grace and everything else that's came out of this has put new exposure on this case. I think it's such a fantastic thing. I know that's not always, people don't always view that in the most favorable light all the time. I've experienced some of that too, but it's also one of those things that it really does get information. People want to talk about it. And there are people out there that know things that don't feel comfortable talking about it to the police, for whatever reason. So, and maybe it's easier to send a Facebook message or, send an email out or whatever. People just do it. And maybe that means it's not that credible, but who knows what piece of information might be the key.
Right.
In terms of connecting one thing to another. And I'm a big believer in that. I think exposure is important. I know it's hard for a lot of people that are dealing with it, but it just is, if you really want answers, I think that's one of the big keys.
Yeah, you got to get people talking about it, no doubt about it.
For sure, yeah.
Well, Frank, we certainly appreciate you coming on and giving some insight on this case. Where can our listeners find you and the stuff you do and all your socials and stuff?
Yeah, I didn't do much of an intro either there, but I work at King Law offices. We have a lot of offices around Western North Carolina. And you can find me on TikTok at King Law CLT. I think you can also find me at Lawyer Frank NC. I think either one of those searches will work. But you can find all the links there on TikTok to my other pages too. I know there's some that may not do as much TikTok. And if that's you, you can find the website of King Law offices. And again, my name's Frank McFarland. And I appreciate you guys having me. It was a blast.
We'll definitely put your links in our show notes and on our socials and stuff, and push people your way and give you more recognition on what you do too.
For sure.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate you.
And I do lives every Wednesday too.
There you go.
Doing only lives about Asha's case for the last couple months or so.
Yeah. So you'll be going live on Wednesdays then. Cool.
Yeah, 2 times, 6 a.m. and 5 p.m.
Wow. Pretty cool. Pretty impressive, no doubt.
Very much so,
yeah. Yeah, we appreciate you a whole bunch, dude. Maybe we can do something again.
Yeah, we'd like for you to come back sometime.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, hopefully when we get some more answers on this thing, it'd be a great time.
Absolutely. Well, Frank.
I appreciate it.
We appreciate you, man. Hit us up anytime.
All right, you have a good one.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, bud. We want to thank Frank McFarland again for coming on the show.
Yeah, I know he was busy. He just made time for us today, and then it was amazing. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with us.
Yes, and we will post all of his socials and all of his links in our show notes and on our socials.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, bud, we're going to get out of here, man.
Okay, let's do it, Bo.
We want everyone to be safe. Please be careful out there and always be aware of your surroundings.
Because the next episode could be about you.
This is the Crack House Chronicles.